The first time I heard my life had already been handed over. I was standing in the leasing office with my work shoes still smelling like lemon cleaner and steak smoke. The building manager slid a form across the desk and asked if I wanted my final key receipt emailed or printed. Because, according to their system, I had voluntarily removed myself from the apartment. I looked at my name on the page, then at the crooked signature beneath it, and for a second, my whole body went quiet before my mouth did. "I never signed this," I told her, and the way her hand stopped above the keyboard told me she had seen enough to worry. She checked the screen again, softer this time, and said the request came through last week with a forwarding address and confirmation from Grant Maddox. Grant was my fiancé, the man who kissed my forehead that morning before I left for my dinner shift and texted me, "Love you. Drive safe." Like nothing had been taken apart behind me. My necklace was still on our bathroom shelf. Maple's pills were still in the kitchen drawer. And my wedding dress was still hanging at Brianna's place because we were supposed to be close enough to forever. Then the manager turned the monitor, and I saw a note under resident access. Temporary entry approved for Whitney Cole. I knew that name before my mind wanted to admit it, because Grant had said it too casually 2 weeks earlier, like someone mentioned by accident but remembered on purpose. I asked who approved her access, and the manager looked down at the form instead of at me, which was an answer with office manners wrapped around it. Before she could speak, the elevator doors opened behind the glass wall, and Grant walked out with Whitney beside him, both moving slowly once they saw me. Whitney had Maple's leash in her hand, my old dog pulling toward me with his whole body, while Grant held the spare key like the problem was not what he had done, but that I had arrived too soon. 3 nights before I stood in that leasing office, Grant took me to his mother's house for what he called a calm family dinner. Marjorie Maddox had set the table like peace could be staged if the plates were white enough and the napkins were folded tight. Arthur sat at the far end with his water glass between both hands, quiet in the practiced way of a man who had learned not to disturb his own house. Grant kept his palm on my knee under the table, warm enough for everyone to notice, heavy enough to feel like warning. Whitney Cole was already there, sitting beside Marjorie as if the chair had been saved for her before I was invited. Marjorie introduced her as a family friend going through a rough season, and Whitney gave me a wounded smile that asked for mercy before accusation. I might have believed she was just uncomfortable until Maple's name came up and Whitney murmured, "He hates thunder." Right. My fork stopped over my plate, because my dog did hate thunder, but I had never told that woman about him. Dinner kept moving, but after that, every sentence had a job. Marjorie asked if I was sure I was ready for marriage, because some women panic when life becomes real, and Grant looked down like I had already hurt him in a story he had rehearsed. I asked what this was about, and Whitney touched her napkin, lowered her voice, and said she did not want to be dragged into anything messy. The word messy landed too cleanly, and Grant did not blink when she used it. Then Grant slid 2 pages across the table. One was a confirmation that I had withdrawn from our apartment lease, and the other was an email canceling our wedding tasting. He said I had been pulling away for weeks, that he was trying to keep things civil, and that everyone deserved honesty before this went further. I stared first at the signature, because my P never curled like that, then at the email address, because whoever sent it missed the tiny dot I had used since college. Arthur saw my face change, and he reached for the paper instead of his glass, pulling it close enough to read the date while Marjorie watched him like a warning. Whitney did not react like a woman accidentally caught inside another woman's life. She stayed very still, one hand around her wine glass, her eyes moving from Grant to Marjorie before they came back to me. I watched that small triangle of looks and understood they had practiced sympathy, not truth. Then she gave me that soft voice again and said, "Iris, I know this hurts, but Grant told me you had been unhappy for a long time." I almost answered her, but she kept going, and every sentence handed me something she should not have owned. She said sometimes people outgrow the life they built, then glanced toward Grant and added that the apartment might feel heavy for me now, especially with the balcony and all those mornings alone. My chest tightened. Not because she sounded cruel, but because she sounded familiar with the shape of my days. I drank coffee on that balcony before sunrise after closing shifts, wrapped in Grant's old hoodie. And the only way Whitney knew that was if he had let her stand there. Grant reached for my hand, but I pulled it back before he touched me. He lowered his voice and said, "Iris, please do not make this harder." And Marjorie nodded, like the line had already been approved. Whitney looked down at the papers and whispered that she never wanted my place, but her thumb moved over the lease form like she already knew where my name had been removed. That was when I stopped hearing the family dinner and started hearing the machinery under it. The email canceling our wedding tasting used a sentence from my own invitation note, but it spelled Marjorie's name the formal way, the way Grant used when he was annoyed with her. The lease form had my signature, but the pressure was wrong. Too light at the end. Too careful where my hand usually got fast. Arthur kept the page near him, eyes fixed on the date, while Marjorie watched him like silence was still her property. I stood up without raising my voice, looked at Grant, and told him he should hope that signature was mine, because if it was not, this was no longer about a wedding. I did not answer Grant that night. His messages came in soft, then careful, then annoyed, each one trying to pull me into a private argument where he could sound reasonable and I could sound hurt. "Don't make this ugly," he wrote before midnight, and I saved the screenshot because those 5 words matched the tone at Marjorie's table. Whitney sent one message after that, saying she hoped I would understand this was healthier for everyone, and I saved that too, because no innocent woman writes like a closing statement. I stayed with Brianna Wells in her South Austin duplex, sleeping on a fold-out sofa while my phone lit up on the coffee table like bait. Brianna worked as a legal assistant, which meant she did not let me cry in circles before she handed me a yellow pad and said, "Start with the first thing you can prove." So I wrote the dinner, the papers. Whitney, knowing Maple, hated thunder. The missed dot in the email, the wrong curve in my signature, and the leasing office note with Whitney Cole's name under temporary entry. Every time my hand shook, Brianna moved one piece closer and made me anchor the pain to something real. By morning, we had a timeline instead of a breakdown. Brianna told me not to edit anything, not to forward anything without saving the original, and not to warn Grant that I was checking every document. She requested the building preserve access records, asked for copies of the lease withdrawal form, and told me a forged signature was not a relationship problem just because a fiancé was holding the pen. I thought of Grant sliding the paper across Marjorie's table like a napkin. Casual because he expected my embarrassment to do the work. The wedding tasting email came from an address almost like mine, but the recovery number ended in digits I did not recognize. The forwarding request used Grant's family address as a middle stop, not ours, and the timestamp placed the submission while I was working the closing shift. Those details did not heal me, but they kept me from begging for an explanation from the person who needed me confused. Then Arthur Maddox texted 4 words after lunch. "I have the envelope," and the quietest man at that table became the first crack in their story. Arthur chose a diner off South Lamar, the kind with cracked vinyl booths and coffee that tasted burned before it touched the cup. He was already there when Brianna and I walked in, with a manila envelope pressed flat under both hands. He did not look like a man coming to save anyone. He looked like a man who had finally run out of places to put his shame. For a minute, nobody touched the coffee. Then Arthur pushed the envelope toward me and said he should have spoken at dinner. The words so low they barely cleared the table. Inside was a printed draft of the email Grant had sent to the leasing office, the one that made my withdrawal look clean. Under it was Grant's text asking his father not to mention the signature, because Iris is emotional and Mom knows how to handle her. Brianna read that line twice, and her face hardened. Arthur watched me instead, then opened his phone and showed another message from Grant. saying Whitney could move a few things in once I stopped making noise. I did not need anyone to explain it, because Whitney's name had been in the access note. Her hand had hovered over the lease form, and her voice at Marjorie's table had sounded rehearsed. Arthur said the forwarding request came to his house by mistake because Grant used the family address as a middle stop. He kept the envelope after seeing my name, then heard Grant tell Marjorie the plan would work if everyone stayed calm. He did not call it confusion, and he did not blame his wife for the silence he chose. I let him talk because every sentence came attached to paper. Dates, messages, and the dinner I had survived. Before we left, Arthur said he would sign a witness statement. He looked smaller after saying it, but steadier too, like truth had taken something from him and given something back. Brianna folded the papers into her bag and told him everything after this needed to be in writing. Arthur nodded once, and the quietest man in Grant's family became the first person willing to put his name under the truth. 2 days later, I walked back into the same leasing office where the building manager had asked how I wanted my final key receipt. This time, Brianna stood beside me with a folder against her ribs, Arthur Maddox near the wall with his signed statement, and a civil attorney asked that every answer stay in the room and on record. Grant came in with Whitney and Marjorie, dressed like clean shoes could still make him look innocent. His face changed when he saw Arthur, because tears he had prepared for, but his father with paperwork was different. Grant sat first and tried to smile at the manager. "Iris is making this bigger than it needs to be," he said. But Brianna placed the lease withdrawal form on the table before he could warm up the room. Whitney folded her hands and whispered that she only accepted the key because Grant told her everything was handled, while Marjorie said families should solve private things privately. The attorney looked at the form and said not when someone's name appears on housing documents without consent. The manager opened the access log, and the room stopped pretending. Grant's spare fob had entered my apartment on 3 nights when my time card showed me closing the restaurant, and Whitney's temporary entry note had been added the morning after Marjorie's dinner. The wedding cancellation came from an email almost matching mine, but the recovery number was not mine, and the lease signature did not match the original file. Grant stared at the table while every sentence from dinner became a time-stamped record. Then the manager asked Whitney how she knew the private elevator code before her name appeared anywhere legitimate. Whitney looked at Grant first, and that glance did what no argument could do. Arthur stepped forward and placed his statement beside the access log, confirming he heard Grant say Whitney could move things in once I stopped making noise. Marjorie whispered Arthur's name like a warning, but he did not look at her, and silence stopped working for the wrong person. The manager disabled Grant's spare fob while we were still sitting there. She marked the lease withdrawal as disputed, removed Whitney's temporary access, and said requests had to be verified in writing by both parties. Whitney's face changed when she realized the apartment had not become hers because she memorized the code. I took Maple's leash from the chair beside Grant, looked at him once, and told him he tried to take the apartment, the dog, and the clean story, but forgot all 3 left records. The fallout did not begin with a post. It began with quiet notices reaching the exact places Grant and Whitney had wanted to enter together. The building confirmed in writing that Whitney's temporary access was removed. My lease withdrawal was disputed, and every request tied to my name required direct verification. When I came back for Maple's medication, the front desk did not greet Grant like a resident anymore. I canceled the wedding the same way I rebuilt the timeline, clean and in writing. To our guest list, I sent one sentence saying the ceremony would not happen, and any questions involving housing documents or unauthorized account access would be handled through counsel. I did not name Whitney, describe Marjorie's dinner, or beg anyone to believe me. I did not have to, because people can forgive an affair faster than they can explain a woman's signature appearing where her hand had never been. Grant tried to repair the story with friends first. He said I had spiraled, that Brianna was feeding me legal words, and that Arthur was confused by family pressure. Then someone asked why the building disabled his fob if this was only emotional. Someone else asked why Whitney needed an elevator code before the lease was settled. And every answer Grant gave had to walk around a record. Whitney lasted less than a week inside the life she had tried to step into. Without the apartment, without Maple, without Marjorie's table treating her like the next clean chapter, she was just the woman whose name sat in an access note she could not explain. She told Grant she never signed anything, and he told her not to make things worse. That was the first honest sentence he had given anyone. Marjorie stopped calling me dramatic after Arthur's statement reached the attorney. Grant's insurance company placed him under review when the civil complaint and documents reached the right hands. Not because he cheated, but because a man trusted with claims and signatures was now attached to a disputed housing form. Whitney disappeared from the dinners she had fought to enter. And I learned some doors do not slam when they close. They simply stop opening for people who lied their way toward them. I did not move back into the apartment Grant tried to hand to Whitney. I ended the lease through the same office where my name had been bent into a lie, signed my real signature in blue ink, and watched the manager stamp the closing form without looking at Grant once. The wedding deposit became a civil settlement handled through attorneys. Maple came home with me, and Grant agreed every future message would go through counsel. The last text he sent directly said, "I never meant for it to go this far." And I saved it beside the first one, because far was where he had driven it. Whitney disappeared before anyone asked her to. Without the apartment, without Maple's leash, without Marjorie calling her sweet girl across a dinner table, she had nothing solid to stand on. Friends stopped inviting her to things where people might ask how she got an elevator code before she had a legal right to be there. She had wanted the life I was living, but the access note made sure everyone remembered she tried to enter it through the side door. Marjorie stayed in her clean house with her white plates and fewer chairs pulled from the wall. Arthur left 3 weeks after signing his statement, not with a speech, just with 2 suitcases and the tired calm of a man refusing to protect a lie. He sent me one card later that said, "I am sorry I waited so long." And I kept it because this time, the apology came with action behind it. Grant lost more than a fiancé, because the review at work made his name heavy in rooms where signatures mattered. I moved into a smaller place near the river, with morning light across the kitchen and enough space for Maple's bed by the window. For weeks, I would hear the elevator and expect my body to tighten. Then remember, nobody there had a code stolen from my life. Brianna helped me hang the wedding dress bag in the back of my closet until I was ready to donate it. I did not feel brand new, but I felt clean. And sometimes clean is stronger than new. Months later, I met someone at a weekend cooking class who listened without trying to become the hero of my story. When I told him some people do not steal your money, they try to steal the life your hands have built, he believed me without asking for proof. If this story touched a place in your own life, leave one quiet word below for the version of you that kept walking. Not because anyone won, but because truth, once protected, can open a better door.